All right, so today we welcome to Global Citizenship Education Interview Series Paul Carr. Paul Carr is a full professor in the Department of Education at the Université du Québec en Ottawa, which is in the National Capital Region of Canada. And he is the chair holder of the UNESCO Chair in Democracy, Global Citizenship, and Transformative Education. Specializing in political sociology, his fields of research include democracy, global citizenship, anti-racism, transformative education, media literacy, peace studies, and the environment. He is the principal investigator of two research projects funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada entitled Democracy, Political Literacy, and Transformative Education, and Social Media, Civic Participation, and Education. He is the editor, co-editor, author, and co-author of some of 20 books, several series of books, and multiple scientific articles, several which have earned him awards and distinctions. Prior to his university career, for several years, he held the position of Senior Policy Advisor at the Ontario Ministry of Education, where he worked with various stakeholders on anti-racist education programs, Aboriginal education, special education, citizenship education, linguistic minority context, and social justice education. So this is a really rich background. Paul, it's a pleasure to have you here and discuss global citizenship education with you.
Thank you, Emiliano. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Wonderful. So all my international guests here would get a first straightforward question. And the question is, what is global citizenship and what is a global citizen in your opinion? And then within these two questions, we can expand on the notion of global citizenship education as well.
Yes, thank you for that, Emiliano, and thank you for your work. You've done a lot of wonderful work and a very broad section of interviews and so on that has really helped build the field of global citizenship education. I think the word global is contested, the word citizenship is contested. Most people around the world, especially governments and others, refer to national citizenship. This is a problem, of course. Global is connected to globalization and other things. So the terminology will always be a problem. We could talk about social justice education, peace education, multicultural education, critical. But where we arrive at global citizenship education, I think, is that within national context, local context, regional context, that we can try to reconcile that there are issues that go much broader than the local context. And we can think of the environment, we can think of mass migrations, we can think of warfare,
right.
Neoliberalism, and so on. All of these issues can not really be fully addressed within local context. It's not to say that we shouldn't be working and developing and engaging locally, but there is an interplay, and we all contribute, even when we're not aware of how we do so, to the global arms industry, to all sorts of decisions that are effectuated in our names. And I think that the communications situation or revolution that has exploded in the last 20 years, in particular with social media, has raised consciousness, the potential for knowledge dissemination, interaction. It can also be hegemonically oppressive, where we kind of bring everyone into one language dominated by English or Western thoughts and values. But I think this is the whole context for global citizenship education. Of course, it's difficult to manifest because nation states and so on may not have an interest in trying to fully connect with it. But we can see, for example, with the environment, there are so many obvious signs that the world, the globe, the earth is in trouble. We're in serious, dire straits. So we have to find ways to work with one another, to dialogue with one another, to engage with one another. And so this is, I think, the basis of global citizenship education. Of course, where does it come from? Does it come from UNESCO? It comes from other people, scholars, and so on. But there has to be a lot of ground up interaction, engagement, and there's a lot of organizations around the world working on this. Global Citizen, I think that, at one point, I think that there was the understanding that if people were traveling and engaging around the world, were speaking languages and so on, I think that, that there might be some currency, but we also know that traveling can be nefarious. And but I do think, that languages, breaking down the hegemony of linguistic, cultural, political thought is important. And real engagement, but working on peace. Peace is fundamental, foundational, working on solidarity. And so we have to look at power relations. And I think my own area of field mainly in democracy, looking at deconstructing and problematizing normative democracy. Normative democracy largely isn't working for most people around the world. So to have global citizenship, we have to think of other ways. And I think there's a lot of informal, non-formal ways, and also formal ways that can push these normative democratic systems to be more democratic. So global citizenship, I think we're all in the same boat. I think we have to think about how we can work together to fight against so many issues, but also build things. It's not just against something, it's to build something up. And we can see this happening, a lot of movements against the xenophobia and so on.
Right. I think you touched on interesting points here, particularly when you're talking about democracy, diversity. So when it comes to the notion of global, as you know very well, there is always a certain level of contestation and discussion, which makes, by the way, the notion of global citizenship education very interesting. So why is the notion of global contested in higher education, in your opinion?
Well, I think that principally that we've developed a system of nation states, and within these nation states, there's a lot of patriotism, nationalism, the fight to maintain certain symbols and authorities and supremacy of certain groups and ethnicities and cultures. And all of that with longstanding historic rivalries and grievances means that the education systems are centered around a certain national identity, and often that's the objective, almost clearly stated. And I'm not saying that that we shouldn't have Peruvian and Argentinian and Italian and Japanese education systems, but essentially those systems in and of themselves are developed in a way that often fight against the notion of a global citizenship foundation. It's very hard to kind of self-critique, and you're in Japan, I'm in Canada. It's very hard, to openly and fully and thoroughly critique the lack of reconciliation in Canada. Although it's fundamental and it's just frontal and engaged, imbued in everything we do, but without critiquing these very strong taboos, it's very hard to move forward. So there's wars, there's cultural identities, and we know that in almost every society there are certain marginalized groups that have been historically placed and discriminated against. And how do we reconcile that? So the global part even makes it more complex, because then it seems like it's an affront to the national identity. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to do so. The notion of nation building, and often there's a perception that if we move towards global citizenship, we will diminish, these national systems. And maybe there is room to diminish some national systems, but we have to think about the environment, peace, and all these mass migrations and so on. This cannot be helpful to the world or to people.
Right. So this in a way ties with my next question. And the question is how notions of global citizenship and global citizenship education are related to your journey as an educator, author, editor. As you know, the so-called journey of life is always ties in a way to our mission as educators, our values, and the way we teach, the way we implement our pedagogy.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a good question that we could use in global citizenship education and have people dissect, diagnose, problematize their own ethnographies, their own feelings. We often do this, and working in anti-racism, what does it mean to be a white person in societies that have valued white supremacy? We don't really look at that. We often think, well, I'm a nice person, my family's nice, and so we have a lot of privilege in a way, and without deconstructing. So I think with the global citizenship, there's no endpoint. It's a process, and I think a lot of things along the way cajole us into trying to understand, and we're not really sure why. But in my own case, I think for a long time I had some sort of either intuition or inkling or concern or agitation that why is there so much discrimination based on for what reason? I didn't have a sophisticated analysis, but earlier many years ago I studied in France for 2 years, and that was a pretty formative experience, and I was a bit cajoled as to why the Maghrebin population or African population was kind of, without anyone kind of pointing and saying, you're not fully included. And we can see this in every country in the world that there's these issues. So over time, I think that my own interest in trying to understand, these long-held cultural conventions juxtaposed against social change and solidarity movements, how does it manifest itself and what can be done? I'm kind of dancing around it, but in my own case, I've had many tremendous experiences in a number of countries and so on, and with people. And I think that our systems have been set up in a way that really prevent a lot of critical engagement. And I'm thinking of these electoral systems, normative democracy systems, democratic systems. So in my own work with the UNESCO chair, we've been working with a lot of people in different countries who kind of share, like-minded ideas in pedagogy and so on. And I think this is one piece of advice I would give to myself, not to anyone else, is that try to encircle yourself with people who have care for you, who share some values and vision. Earlier on, there was a lot of time. I'm not going to say it was wasted, but we can't convince people and pound on them with hammers on an anvil.
I was wondering, as it relates to your journey of life as a human being, and what you can identify as the moment that really connected you with the notion of global citizenship education in terms of how you identify with the concept and the value that this we can call it ethical platform has for education in terms of for example your UNESCO chair and important notions such as democracy and the transformative aspect and critical aspect of education. So what has been really the moment in your life when you felt connected and you felt a connection with this notion?
Yeah, I think that it's been relatively recently, to be honest with you, that many years working on anti-racism and democracy and social justice and education, this seemed really concrete and something, for example, in democracy, if all of the education systems, pretty well around the world, but in the Western world in particular, are premised on the basis that we're democracies, therefore our educations are democratic. But But if you ask educators and ministers of education and so on, what are those democratic foundations, those books, those philosophies? How do we actually do it? And in their own research, our research projects in this area, most people in education aren't really sure. And a lot of people are surprised, why are you asking me to connect education and democracy? So from
and
there,
also, what is democracy today? That is another crucial question, I believe.
Yeah. Outside of these elections, and of course, we're concerned. The results. A lot of these elections aren't necessarily favorable. But about 7 or 8 years ago, I spent several months at UNESCO in Paris with my colleague Gina Tizzi, and we were engaged in some global citizenship projects. And then when we came back, we put together an application for the UNESCO chair on democracy, global citizenship, and transformative education. We originally proposed it as democracy, cultural pluralism, and transformative education. But Gina, my colleague, who's also my wife, so I'm in a conflict of interest, said,
but it's wonderful that you advancing together this important vision.
So yeah, and so she suggested, why don't we put global citizenship, because this is a term that really can bring people together more so maybe than cultural pluralism.
Yeah.
So I think about 7 or 8 years ago, I started to really think about it. And I also maybe before that felt, what is it? It's kind of a superfluous concept and so on. But more and more, over time, we've written about it. We've engaged in it. We're doing research. We're doing some work with UNESCO and APCU. And so I think it's the concept of it that we can bring people together, these critical dialogues, and looking at issues that go well beyond kind of 20th century nation states. And
I think what you're saying here is so important. I felt the same. I felt that the discussion around the global citizenship education is complex, but had certainly brought back the political, the notion of values, the notion of social justice, critical pedagogy, in a sort of a platform that really blends together important concepts that in a way I felt were kind of lost in the last 10 years or so in education itself, particularly education, but this is my personal opinion. And in relation to what you just said, I want to ask you a question related to your forthcoming projects, particularly your UNESCO Chair Symposium coming up October 25th, 28th this year, 2022. So I have a little bit of background information based on our discussions, but I like really our audience to learn more details about this very important symposium. The theme, perhaps, the importance, the relevance of this symposium, some of the people speaking. I think our audience would definitely benefit in hearing this firsthand from you in this discussion today.
Yeah, it will be a pleasure. And Emiliano, I'll share with you maybe some links and the posters, and if people are interested,
yes,
they're very much welcome to attend. So
absolutely,
essentially, this is our second symposium of the UNESCO Chair in Democracy, Global Citizenship, and Transformative Education. The first one took place in Montreal in May 2021, totally online. Of course, we had planned it
because of COVID-19.
And we learned a great deal. And it was, I think at one level, it was innovative in the sense that we didn't know what we were doing, but we had to do it online. We put it on Zoom and Facebook, and then later on YouTube. And we had roughly 100 presenters from 30 countries. There were about 40 sessions, English, French, and Spanish, roughly distributed that way, and several were simultaneously interpreted. We were quite surprised. There were roughly 15,000 people from 70 countries who attended. We're not fully sure why or how.
15,000?
Yeah.
Incredible. You mean connected online?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Because it was open access. And essentially we had sessions, 1-hour sessions related to a range of subjects around democracy, global citizenship, and transformative education. Of course, they're overlapping, but we tried to have one day of democracy and so on. And we had several sessions with indigenous scholars on anti-racism, on the environment. So in 2022, October 25th to 28th in Valparaiso, Chile, we're partnering with our colleagues there at the Pontifical Universidad Católica de Valparaíso that we're going to have some of the symposium live in person, the plenary conference each day. There's 4 plenaries, the opening and closing, and there'll be 36 sessions, 18 in Spanish, 9 in French, 9 in English, plus the 4 plenaries. And once again, we have there's about 125 presenters from roughly 30 countries. And they're 1-hour sessions. Our notion is trying to cross cultural, linguistic, disciplinary, political boundaries. And so we've shaped these 1-hour sessions around dialogues. Before the symposium, we meet with each group for a couple times. So there's a chairperson and usually 3 or 4 people. And we have people from the academic sector, but also civil society. And once again, we have sessions dealing with indigenous rights, reconciliation, the environment, political issues. And the majority of sessions now are in Spanish, 18, but our hope is that we can have many interactions with the outside world.
Right.
We have some partners, APSEU, our colleagues in Seoul, South Korea, and also UNESCO and some other organizations. Essentially, it's open access, and we're hoping to, we've just launched the whole project yesterday online. So we've got a social media campaign. But Emilio, to be honest with you, we're not professional event organizers. And there's so many aspects to this. We have a pretty large organizing committee. But social media, we do research on social media, but the whole project is social media. So looking at data collection and algorithms and the way things are shared. And I mentioned previously that there were people from roughly 70 countries who participated. We don't know how they learned about it. But
I think I think when a symposium like the one you're describing is organized with heart, with passion, I think people understand that, and probably they shared and everyone connected, and certainly they got very interesting ideas from the symposium. And I'm confident that this year's symposium will also be successful, and I very much look forward to interacting with with the symposium. This will be October 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th of this year, 2022. Okay, so we will certainly then share the link after we publish this video interview on my YouTube channel, and then of course we can find other ways to promote the symposium. So let me conclude this very interesting conversation with you, Paul, with a crucial question, a core question. And again, all my international guests here would try their best to answer this question, defined by many a challenging one. So the question is, how would you define global citizenship education using 3 keywords? And why these 3 keywords?
Yeah, no, this is a very nice way to dialogue on these issues. And I don't want to be contrarian and complex or difficult, but I think I would have 5 words. And
5?
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think the first 3 are, peace. We cannot think about global citizenship without peace, and solidarity in a very broad, critical sense. Solidarity meaning participation, engagement, and social change. We can't continue on where wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, and we have so many other social inequalities. And then the 2 additional words, if we can throw them in the mix. I think that environment is at a critical crisis point. It affects all of humanity. It affects cultures, people, groups, but also species, ecosystems. This, I think, is really uniting the whole world. And the last word, of course, is love. Without love, I think the whole exercise is pointless. We're just be in some sort of material race to the bottom.
Yeah, this is a new entry, love. I heard the previous peace, solidarity, social change, environment. Of course, each and every scholar, constructs the different meaning, a different emphasis on different points. But love is definitely new and very important, definitely. So peace and love, to come back to the, wonderful times of the 60s. And but
maybe just if I can add, I think radical love in the Paulo Freire sense, conscientization, and that involves an emancipation.
Love for humanity, absolutely, absolutely. So without love for humanity and peace, as you say, it is difficult to talk about critical approaches to global citizenship education. Thank you very much to Paul Carr. Paul is a full professor in the Department of Education at the Université du Québec en Étoile. And it was a pleasure to speak with you. And we discussed very important points, including the important work that you're doing as a UNESCO chair in democracy, global citizenship, and transformative education, your forthcoming symposium, October 25th, 28th of this year, and concepts of peace, solidarity, social change, environment, and love. Thank you very much, Paul. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Emiliano. Wonderful to be with you.